Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sports Wired. I'm Jackson Martin. Alongside me is Reid Harris. We have a lot to talk about in the world of Commodore sports today, so let's get to it. We are going to start off talking about your Commodore basketball team is rolling through SEC play. 2 big wins this week against Ole Miss and Georgia, but they got another test against South Carolina tomorrow night that we're going to break down for you. And then we're going to look forward to the Kentucky, Florida, and Tennessee games, as well as the SEC tournament. Then we're going to take a look to the Sunken Diamond, where your Commodores got swept by the number 2 Stanford Cardinal in California this weekend on the baseball diamond. And then Oregon is coming to town this week, and what can the Commodores do to improve on that performance and hopefully come out with a series victory? After that, we're going to do a quick recruiting update. The Commodores picked up a huge commitment this past week from a Georgia quarterback. And then after that, we're going to take a walk around the Vandy bubble and see what's going on in the other sports. So, let's get to it. The big wins over Ole Miss and Georgia. Reid, what does it mean for the team?
It means a lot. I think a lot of the team was struggling with confidence issues, unable to kind of take the next step as a team. And looking at those games, we really saw the stars come out. We saw, especially in the first game, you saw Jeff Taylor really take over. In SEC play, he's shooting 60% from 3, which is just unreal. Yeah. You look at the player he's become over the past 2 years. 2 years ago, his sophomore season, the entire year, he was 1 for 11 from three-point range. Wow. You look now, he's one of the best three-point shooters in the country, shooting 49% on the year. You can just really see his market development as a player. Then, moving right ahead to the Georgia game, we saw John Jenkins just take over. His numbers weren't incredibly spectacular, especially as compared to where he's been in the past. But he just played extraordinarily well. Yep. Did everything they needed to do to make sure the team would win, and we're finally kind of seeing that star power lift up the team. When Festus played so poorly Wednesday night, John stepped up and did everything he can to make sure the team would win. Right,
and it should be noted, John Jenkins, SEC Player of the Week, shot 80% from the field, 80% from three-point range, had an effective field goal percentage of 85%, which is absolutely unheard of, particularly in conference play.
And for a shooting guard.
Yeah, absolutely.
You kind of see that from a center who just kind of does a lot of layups, a lot of dunks. But John, he actually missed more free throws than he did three-point shots this week, which is just ridiculous.
Against Ole Miss, 26 points on just 5 shots. Yeah. I mean, he's been putting up unreal numbers this week and stepping up in a way that maybe we haven't seen him do yet this conference play. We've seen the team trend a little bit more towards being led by Jeffrey Taylor. Mm-hmm. So it was nice to get 2 big performances from John this week, and 2 needed ones. Obviously, the Ole Miss game, huge blowout. Commodores became the first SEC team this year to post 100 points in conference play. But in the Georgia game, that's a team that gave the Commodores trouble earlier this year, and they did again this year. Commodores trailed at halftime, but were ultimately able to come back against Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and the Bulldogs for the second time this year.
Right, and the thing about that Georgia game, it really is the mark of a good team to be able to play really poorly, which is what Vanderbilt did.
They did.
And still come out with a big victory. Right. Vanderbilt played very poorly, didn't rebound very well, didn't shoot well, didn't do anything terribly well, but still came out with a victory over what is probably an underrated Georgia team. Certainly a very athletic Georgia team.
Yeah, and certainly that Ole Miss blowout shouldn't be taken for granted either. That's a team that was trying to work its way onto the NCAA tournament bubble before that, just shellacking, and had only lost once in Oxford all year. Mm-hmm. Huge crowd, they were fired up. The student section was completely full, nationally broadcast game, and the Commodores just stomped them.
Absolutely.
And it was something that was really good to see from a team that really needed a boost like that. Now, hopefully they're going to be able to continue that tomorrow night against South Carolina, who, there's really no other way to put this, South Carolina sucks. But that being said, it's a team that could still beat Vanderbilt. And as we saw last year, Bruce Ellington has the ability to turn into some combination of Jeremy Lin and Reggie Miller, that likes of which you don't normally see in coming out of Columbia. But like I said, Commodores got to stay focused, because while it may not be a good South Carolina team, it is a potentially dangerous one.
Right, and you look at the way that he can play at the guard position. It's reminiscent of a Devin Downey at South Carolina 2 years ago. You may remember 2 seasons ago, Vanderbilt in the South Carolina game. Vanderbilt was poised to go 13-3 in the conference slate. Vanderbilt had crushed South Carolina going in earlier in the season at home. Then all of a sudden, in Columbia on the road. Then South Carolina comes to Nashville and it just beats Vanderbilt up and down the court in what was a very disappointing game for Vanderbilt fans. They really crushed momentum heading into the tournament. And we're looking at something that this really can't happen. It's certainly not a must-win per se as far as getting into the tournament or succeeding in the SEC tournament, but it is an extremely important game for momentum heading into this last stretch in conference play. And against a team that Vanderbilt should have no trouble with regardless of Ellington's play.
Right. And I would argue it might not be a must-win, but it is a can't-lose for this team, particularly going into the SEC tournament where, as we're turning our sights towards that with just 4 games left in the season, the Commodores holding on to that 3rd seed in the SEC. There's no divisions this year in SEC basketball, so just your top 4 overall teams are going to get your first-round byes. Currently, Vanderbilt holds a 2-game lead over the 4th-place team, Mississippi State. However, the Bulldogs do have the tiebreaker. But I think, at least to me, even the bigger thing, Vanderbilt just 1 game behind Florida for that 2nd seed in the SEC and getting back to maybe where we thought the Commodores would be at the beginning of this season.
And they have a lot of chances to do that. We still have another shot at Florida. Have chances to beat Tennessee, which should be a big win, and of course South Carolina coming up. So Vanderbilt has a chance to really pick up a lot of momentum and, like you said, a seeding advantage heading into the SEC tournament, and the ability to secure what could probably be seen as a 4 seed is probably what we were looking for in the NCAA tournament from Vanderbilt. It could be better. With a very strong SEC tournament play, could very likely be worse, especially considering how the rest of these games go. But when it comes down to, I say this again, the momentum has got to be picked up. It's got to be strong heading into tournament play. You even look at last year. A team like UConn that didn't have the best season got hot at the right time and was undefeated in tournament play, preseason and postseason. So that's the kind of thing that Vanderbilt's just got to be able to do heading into these last few weeks of the season.
Certainly. Now, another team looking to make a return trip to the NCAA tournament is our baseball team here at Vanderbilt. However, they started off the season ranked number 10 by Baseball America, matched up with the number 2 Stanford Cardinal, and things just got rough over the weekend. 3 straight losses, none of them even particularly close. And it says a lot about this young Vanderbilt team, really, that they weren't ever even really able to get a significant lead against Stanford in any of the games, and any lead they had disappeared within the next half inning.
Yeah, you look at that game 3, they got out to a 4-0 lead. Vanderbilt looked like they would be able to show what they were really made of on the diamond, and then it turns out that they just gave it up all in a hurry with Selman kind of crumbling under that small lead that he had. And you look at this baseball team, we in the fall series had a few games against Cal State Fullerton here in Nashville. Looked similarly bad, showed very little promise of the team that we saw last year. Of course, we lost 12 guys to the draft. I believe they lost a lot of arms, more arms than anyone had ever lost in SEC history to the Major League Baseball draft. So we knew we were looking at a rebuilding season, and this would not be the same team that hosted a Super Regional last year. But that said, I think that everyone was expecting a little bit more competition, a little bit more in the field especially. You look at the outfield that performed pretty well, but the infield did nothing. Their gloves were just non-existent throughout the weekend series.
It was 11 errors on the series. Now, it should be noted, Stanford, the number 2 team in the country behind Florida, has the pitcher Mark Apple, who started the Friday game, probably going to be your first overall pick in the June MLB amateur draft. And a couple other guys, a couple other bats that project to be first-round picks as well. So this is a very talented Stanford team, but nonetheless, you'd like to see a little bit more competition out of the Commodores. But like Reid said, a lot of losses in this lineup, and it's a young team, but a talented team, and one that you hope is going to get it together by the end of the year.
Yeah, and there's a lot of time. We look at tomorrow, the Commodores basketball team hosts South Carolina, and at the same time, baseball hosts Oakland in their home opener. They'll get to hopefully get a little more confidence in an Oakland team that's just, quite frankly, not as talented as an SEC team like Vanderbilt is. Yeah. And hopefully, Vanderbilt will be able to find the chemistry that was not present over in Palo Alto. Because as it stood in that weekend series against Stanford, it just wasn't there. The gloves weren't there. The bats couldn't string together any hits to put any substantial runs on the board, and the pitching was subpar at best. And so looking ahead, Stanford obviously very good. One shouldn't judge this Vanderbilt baseball team based against them. Stanford may very well be the best team in the country.
But at the same time, that's the level we expect Vanderbilt to play at, particularly after the last few years.
Right. And I really do think that Vanderbilt can play at that level the coming season. There's a lot of room to grow, a lot of young players that will be seasoned as the season progresses. There's a lot of really young talent, and we'll start to learn more about that. I really do believe tomorrow against Oakland. But looking ahead, we look ahead to this weekend.
Yep, and a weekend series with the Oregon Ducks, also out of the Pac-12 Conference. Now, Oregon is a relatively new Division I baseball team, only getting up to that status 2 years ago. Previously, it had just been a club team, but a lot of money from Nike founder Phil Knight, who wanted to restore the Oregon baseball team to its previous glory, I suppose you would say. So the Ducks making a trip down to Nashville this weekend. Not a team that's nearly as good as Stanford, and not a team that's going to be as talented as Vanderbilt.
Right.
But what do we need to see from the team to start a turnaround?
Right, and to see that turnaround, Vanderbilt in the past has shown incredible potential. You know, this recruiting class was ranked first in the country by Baseball America.
Yeah.
The talent is on the roster.
Yeah.
Coach Corbin talked about his team like a child. He says when you're raising a kid, you have one, you see what you did right, you do that again, you see what you did wrong, and don't do that again. He needs to take this team and nurture it in the same way he did in last year's squad to get the talent, locate it, and put it out there on the field. You've got to think the talent's there. And it's just got to find its way, get the chemistry. The team's got to come together and start playing at a high level. And, you know, like you mentioned, Oregon, not the most talented team.
Right, but Ducks fly together.
Ducks fly together. But this is a great opportunity for Vanderbilt to come together, show the chemistry that I think that they do on the practice field, and really come together and show that they do deserve to be mentioned among the nation's elite teams.
And it certainly could help returning home. Nice, hopefully a sunny Friday afternoon. You're going to get a lot of students out there yelling at the right fielder. I know that's what I plan on doing. But hopefully a crowd that's going to get this team back into that mindset of being a top 10 team like we expect them to be. Now, speaking of top 10, hopefully, Vanderbilt recruiting is off to a hot start this year. Picked up their first commitment of 2013. Quarterback Jonathan McCrary out of Cedar Grove High School in Atlanta, Georgia, or I should say just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm not going to call him on that. He's really from Ellenwood. But this is a quarterback who is rated the 80th best player in the country by Rivals. He's a guy who we've seen may serve almost as a Brian Kimbrough of this class. He said he's already started recruiting, including the nation's #1 overall prospect, Robert Nemdici. But a prospect that you certainly have to look out for. I know I can say personally, he played in the region with my high school, so I've seen him play once or twice, and the kid is the real deal. Great speed, huge arm, just the type of quarterback who can take Vanderbilt to that next level, hopefully.
Right, and like you mentioned before, this goes beyond just what a single player can do athletically for Vanderbilt. This is the kind of guy who's very charismatic, he's very active, talks to a lot of other commitments, and he could really go a long way towards being the dynamic player and player recruiter to get other guys in Nashville with him. You know, you mentioned he's already contacted Robert Nemdici over Twitter and probably other ways too.
Everything would explode if Robert Nemdici.
McCrary himself was quoted in an article as saying, you know, Nemdici seriously considering Vanderbilt, and that says a lot about his character. And that means a lot. Nemdici is a specific example, but McCrary could go a long way towards bringing other Tier 1 talent to Vanderbilt.
Especially in a Georgia recruiting class that looks to be the most talented in years, featuring 2 players in the top 10 players in the country. I thought an interesting thing to look at, of the Rivals' top 10 players, 4 of them have listed Vanderbilt among the schools that they're interested in. And that's something that, you know, even if those guys are, you know, a shot in the moon to get, but just the fact that they're considering Vanderbilt says a lot about what James Franklin has done with this program and how well he has recruited. And even if McCrary doesn't end up coming to Vanderbilt, just the fact that a top 100 player and a top 15 quarterback in the nation committed to Vanderbilt is going to turn a lot of prospects' heads, and it's going to get a lot of positive spotlight for this program.
It really is. It's really a sign that Franklin, we've seen glimpses of it in the past. We saw glimpses of it with last year's recruiting class at that signing day event that so many of us were able to go to. This is just yet another sign. the program is moving forward. The program is doing so much. James Franklin is taking this team to places it's never been before, at least not in this modern era of college football. And we're getting there. Jonathan McCrary's commitment is a huge sign of that. It came out of nowhere. His own father came out and said, yeah, I had no idea he was going to commit today.
He was scheduled to make a visit to Alabama this past Saturday. On Thursday night, committed to Vanderbilt, canceled the visit to Alabama's junior day, which is a huge deal, too. And then said, actually, I'm going to go take an unofficial visit to Nashville this weekend. So it came out of the blue, but my God, was that a pleasant surprise. And things really looking up for Vanderbilt on the recruiting trail. And hopefully looking up for the rest of the teams around the Vandy bubble as well. Your number 13 women's lacrosse team is going to go play against North Carolina this weekend, Sunday at noon. As we said, men's basketball playing South Carolina tomorrow night. Also, men's baseball playing against Oakland University at Hawkins Field tomorrow night. And then we got the women's basketball team playing Saturday in Baton Rouge against LSU. So a lot going on in the world of Vanderbilt sports this week. And hopefully it goes well, and hopefully we will see you next week. We're just about out of time. So for Reid Harris, I'm Jackson Martin. You've been watching VU Sports Wired. We'll see you next time.